Hi everybody, I hope you can hear me. We're about to start. Could I request, if at all possible, if you've got a camera, really makes it far more easy doing a webinar if I've got a face to approach or talk to. So if you've got cameras, please turn them on. The intent of this session is to make sure it's interactive. So at any stage you have questions or you want to put your hand up, please do so. Thank you, gentlemen. Turning your cameras on. I'll be directing my attention to you. Like I said, it just makes it far more easier for me as a presenter. A little bit of background for those who've not been involved with me before. My name is Steve Dunn. I've been doing this now for around 25 years of crisis, security and incident management. But for 12 years actually, I've been supporting schools. The systems I've put in place were adopted by CWA in WA across all their schools. And now I'm supporting other schools, both public and private. If you have any questions or you want to do some follow-up, please reach out to my email. I've got a YouTube channel where I'm putting a lot of concepts and best practice as well. And likewise, feel free to visit the website. So with today's activity, so let's set some context. We are dealing with current threats and hazards. A fire occurring on your property during school hours is not a realistic threat or hazard for your school. However, it does constitute more than 90% of everyone's emergency plans, how to do an evacuation drill. We need to make sure we get that balance right, and you're dealing with what are the real threats and hazards that are impacting and causing stress for your staff. And that's where our focus is today with the drills that we'll be looking at. We do align with the Australian standard for planning for emergencies in facilities, but pure straight application of that just doesn't fit. We also need to make sure that whatever we're putting in place with your plans, it works during school hours, after school hours, for events on and off campus. So it needs to have a respond and management function. What I'm discussing here can be rolled out to a small school or to some of the largest institutions in Australia. So my smallest school where I've rolled this out is in Whyalla, 38 kids. To schools which have over 3,000 students. However, that student in Whyalla could pick up, move to that large school, and they know what to do. They know the terminology, they know the drills, they know the processes. And that's likewise with staff. So it's relevant doesn't matter how big your school is, it works. And what we've really focused on, what can we do that's budget conscious? Let's not go and buy a brand new software package. I mean, you subscribe to thousands of those anyway. What can we do that's cheap and effective that we can roll out tomorrow at your school? Every fortnight, I get an article like this in our local paper. So let's make sure we're dealing with this as a threat. So what we have within the plans, I wanted to, as I said, respond and manage. Flexibility, being robust and enduring. Shelter in place is one of the key elements to ensuring that your plan is flexible. All hazards approach is once again achieved through a shelter in place drill, and I'll go through some definitions of that, what that means. We need to have clear roles and responsibilities, layered comms. We want to make sure whatever we put into place is student empowering, that our students can operate and perform a drill without any intervention. They know what to do, and there's systems and processes that we've implemented to support that. I want to make sure that we practice and review our drills, and we keep it very, very simple. Let's make sure our drills are simple for your staff. So you'll have your incident management plan in place. So this is the plan that I support schools with. It's comprehensive. It's a plan that needs to be able to work, as I said, during school hours, off school hours, for events on and off campus. The plan is really essentially those top few lines there. All these other supporting elements are duty cards, which are then deconstructed and put out where they're needed, where people can get their hands on them. So if everybody's operating off their one-page duty card, they're actually achieving the entirety of the plan. This is for a large school. The top component tells the person who's having to instigate the plan, what do I need to do to set it up? What will my training regime be? What are the communication systems I need? It's not just a procedure. I go to many schools and all I see is a procedure, but then no plan on how that procedure is implemented across the school. And then obviously we've got our duty cards to support that. So in fact, this plan, there's a little black box up the top here, which says, do not use this plan in the emergency. So we haven't done that since the early 1990s, where we've got people sitting there faffing through a big book, trying to find out what bit they need to do. We don't do that anymore. Everything's broken down into these concise duty cards, providing instructions for people to operate. So this is the plan. So now let's get our staff trained. Never give your staff the entirety of that plan. And I see so many schools go, it's mandatory, everyone's got to read that plan. It causes a lot of anxiety because now they're trying to work out, what am I meant to memorize from this for my little job? Don't do that. Let's make it easy. So a lot of schools, we create a guide, which is essentially 2 pages of text and a bunch of pictures to describe what we want them to do to be effective within that plan. So it condenses that. Then we ensure all that information is represented on evacuation diagrams, or if not on the diagram, maybe on a side panel where we can see shelter in place as the drill. And then importantly is we like to create a 4 to 5 minute video on your school's incident management plan, and it's used for every induction. So every time a staff member comes to site, new staff member, new student, they watch a 4-minute induction because they might miss out on doing your practice drill, and that'll be weeks or months later until you do another one. So we're setting this framework for getting our drills to work. The next thing we need to make sure we've got good team structures in place. So this is a big school, open school, lots of students, lots of different moving parts here. So, and this is always broken up into 2 elements. So the grey bit is our management team for events on and off campus after hours. They are used for every emergency. They do planning, messaging, business continuity simultaneously. And this is your tactical team, everyone down the bottom. And they really only deal with events occurring on campus. And you get sometimes we go right down to a little school, what that looks like. And here we still have our management team, and then we have a small tactical components. These are the duty cards I was talking about, deconstructing your plan into a 1-page set of instructions. So what we have here with these warden duty cards, you can see that they're covering what to do in an evacuation, short, clipped notes, what to do in a shelter in place, and what to do in a lockdown. So, and you can see here, all of these cover not just the building, but an area as well. And sometimes they'll cover car parks, and that'll come into play when we look at the shelter in place drill as well. So what do we do with these duty cards? As I said, don't put them in the folder in the admin, useless to everybody. Let's put them where they're needed. Those warden duty cards, because it's in an emergency environment, everything emergency should be wall mounted. So why do we do this? This is done because it's a visual cue to passers-by that the role's been taken or not. So that's how we build in flexibility with our roles and appointments. So now we're still setting it up for an effective drill. Is we need comms. Comms is king. So we want layered comms. And this is something really simple that every school can implement. So we always have our audible alarm, but what is best practice is every time you have an alarm, push out an alarm message. It's really important that all staff, that messaging goes out to all staff. And here's an example of a lockdown message. And it basically says, we're going to lockdown, follow procedures. If you're off-site, stay off-site until you get the all clear. Now we get into what I find is some of the biggest issues with schools is their tactical communications to be able to deal with a dynamic and ever-changing emergency scenario. A lot of schools will use radios. Radios are great. And I've dealt with a number of schools that will have their hats for their warden zones, and then in a charging station within visibility of that hat is their radio. I'd also have that backed up by a chat group. Chat groups cost you nothing. If at this stage with your school you don't have a chat group for your incident response team, make one right now. But you must have a 2-way communication system to support your incident response team. Then we have 2-way and remote for our incident management team. This is where Teams and WhatsApp are really easy for you to manage because there's only a small number of people. A lot of my schools will have the incident management team on just a little WhatsApp group. Our next level is pushed messaging, and this is to all staff. Use an existing system that you already have that you talk to all staff on. That is used for your alarm messaging, holding statements, situational updates. All of that needs to go out to staff. And then whatever you're going to use for your school community, what messaging platform, whether it's sector, email, or whatever. So out of this comms, this level 1 comms is the one I want you to think about. How do we do it in our school? So all of you will have this in place. It'll look something like this, varying degrees. So now we can talk about our drills based and set in the context of what we've just discussed here. So let's get into our emergency drills. So these are the 3 drills that we should have. They deal with all threats and all hazards. So evacuate is a very dramatic drill, and everyone's moving outside to a ventilated space. So that's at the extreme to get everyone out. Let's drop down to the bottom here. Lockdown. Lockdown is another very big and dramatic drill. We've got everybody moving inside, barricading, locking doors, lights out. When I started this process, as I said, I was looking at schools going, hey, where's your middle ground? So shelter in place is now that middle ground. And this is the drill. Once you've implemented it, you'll be doing nearly 95% of the time, because it is the best drill for a leader, a commander, the Chief Warden. So a little bit of definition. I'm not expecting you to read this, but it's so evacuation. Let's get them outside to to a ventilated space. Lockdown. The key differences here: hide out of sight. Lights off, doors locked. Shelter in place. Continue with normal class activities. Doors are locked. This drill is optimized command and control space for you as a leader. The key thing with this drill, it gives you the headspace to make a plan and develop a concept of operations. You're not now rushing into a decision, because everyone's safely tucked inside. So really important as a leader, this is the drill you want. We call it the principal's friend. So lockdown is a threat-based response. So what we've done, we've just gone one lockdown. Lockdown means there's a perpetrator on site with the intent to harm. Let's get rid of all those lockdowns. They're confusing. And what they've done is they've watered down the actual lockdown response. Shelter in place now, with lockdown, shelter in place can take a lot of that security threat. Shelter in place is that precautionary step that can deal with hazards and threats. And then lockdown, you can implement that if it escalates. And like I said, very rare for you to do it, but it's a drill that we do need to have in our back pocket because of the catastrophic effect of a lockdown event.
Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. Lock doors, move away from the windows.
Remember, lockdown locks lights out of sight. So now we talk about shelter in place. An alarm is completely different.
Shelter in place, shelter in place. Move inside locked doors and continue with class activities. Monitor devices for updates.
So it's just setting that tone about what we want to do, brings everyone in. And remember, the lockdown alarm will play continuously. This plays twice, shuts down, because you can't do business as normal activities with a damn alarm playing consistently over the top. Some schools don't use the emergency screens because it interrupts your teaching rhythm, and they just use the alarm. So as I said, all threats, all hazards. So just some points: medical emergencies, shelter in place, great for a medical emergency. Why? I've cleared the grounds. Ambulance can approach. I've got my sentries out. I've got everyone watching their phones. So what we're doing in shelter in place as a staff member, it's look at me, don't look out the window, as much as you can achieve that. You can have intruders on campus, shelter in place. A classic one, we have a school here that's a coastal school, and someone found a big fat brown snake in kindy, and then they couldn't find it again. So let's shelter in place until we can work out where that snake's gone. Likewise, we've done similar things with dogs or other hazards. So all threats, all hazards. In fact, the question marks here, if you are the leader doing the drill and you're going, oh golly, what am I going to, I don't know what to do, your default, shelter in place, until you can work it out. So if ever you're thinking about what the drill is, just shelter in place, because who's it going to impact? Nobody. The people doing PE, they need to come inside, find somewhere to then shelter in place. Everybody else, there's no impact. We then talk about what do we do shelter in place at lunch and recess. We encourage our students to go to their next class. Staff member on duty, they'll be watching that, dragging people in. But if you've got a bunch of kids who are right down one end of the campus and it's just taking too long, they'll be ushered into a class. So you may find yourself with a mixed class just to get everyone tucked away inside in a timely manner. So, and then if you're in your staff room, shelter in place happens, then we recommend you move back to your class. Now, each of you will have your governing bodies will tell you what the regime for drills are. My recommendations are a fire drill once per year, unless you're down the bottom, bushfire. Lockdown, we're not America, it's up to you, but I recommend doing a lockdown drill once every 2 years, is an appropriate frequency, but make sure we do our shelter in place. And the beauty of shelter in place, quite seriously, the students don't even know you've done it. They might have heard the alarm. It has no impact on them. It's just business as normal during school hours. But I would recommend let's do some of these drills during a lunch break. And alarm testing is something that I really encourage every school to do, once in term 1, once in term 3.
Stand by for alarm testing. Evacuation. Shelter in place. Lockdown. All clear. Alarm testing over.
Let's socialise our students with their alarm tones so they can hear this will take 20 seconds to do, and we should do it at a lunch break. Right, and then finally, I just want to touch on your practice drills. So for our schools, we create these sheets. They go near all the alarm systems, whether it's microphones or buttons, whatever, tells you what to do in an actual emergency and then in a practice. By adopting a culture whereby every time you do a practice drill, just before you press the button, get on the PA system and say, stand by for a practice drill, punch out a message on your push messaging system, stand by for a practice drill, and then you press the button. So make sure they know it is a practice drill. Any questions on what we're going through there? Does anyone have shelter in place, or maybe you call it by a different name in your school? Could be one of those other softer lockdown approaches. In this section, we'll quickly touch on some of the flashcard scenarios used during the webinar. Each of these scenarios, we discuss the benefits of a shelter in place state with the ability to create an optimized command and control state and the ability to clear the grounds for emergency responders, giving the incident controller the headspace to come up with an appropriate course of action. The first emergency we deal with is a medical emergency. Depending on the severity, shelter in place is a good state to adopt. We've had scenarios where there have been wild animals on site, dogs, even bees. The school adopted a shelter in place state until they could assess the danger. In this situation, there's a fire on school grounds, however it's in the car park. This doesn't require a full school evacuation. However, shelter in place is a good state to adopt, giving the incident controller time to assess whether the smoke, wind direction has any impact on classes. Shelter in place is also being used for accidents that have occurred external to the school in determining whether access points have been impacted. It also is appropriate adopting a shelter in place to once again denying students observing these incidents during change of class times. Shelter in place is a very useful drill in a bushfire environment. If smoke is observed in the distance or near distance, the school can go into a shelter in place state, giving the incident controller time to determine whether that particular fire is going to have an impact on the school, speaking to the fire services. Intruders on site, shelter in place can be appropriate. In this situation, there's an intruder on site, may not possibly start off with a shelter-in-place state, but if it was ever to escalate, you'd escalate to a shelter-in-place state, and once again, if it escalated any further, we could adopt a lockdown. For a bomb threat, adopting a shelter-in-place state is an appropriate course of action, calling the police, and then determining what next steps to take. Knee-jerk to a evacuation in some circumstances is not the safest and most appropriate option. An intruder on site, in this case a young male with a knife, this should prompt an immediate lockdown for a school. In a situation where it's one of your students with a knife, jumping straight into a lockdown response may not be the most appropriate course of action. Once again, if there's any doubt, go to a shelter in place where everybody's safely inside, and then determine what the next best steps are. Adopting a shelter-in-place state can be quite useful if police notify the school of criminal activity in the area, or likewise, criminal activity related to school community members that may impact staff or students on site. In conclusion, thank you for attending. So shelter-in-place offers you the flexibility to be able to deal with any threat. It creates that optimized command and control space. And if you don't have it, it's so easy to roll out. There is no training liability, seriously, and it's so easy to enact if you need it. So please, if you don't have anything like this, you don't have that intermediate or middle ground, put that in place, because your Chief Warden and your principal or incident controller will really appreciate the flexibility that this as emergency drill provides. Look, finally, if your school wants to, we have a package that we can roll out where within 30 days we can have the best practice system in place at School Incident Solutions. I am the only depository of evolving best practice, and what that means is, because I'm not bound by a template, every time I engage with the school, I will learn something, and those learnings are then always evolving and put back into a best practice solution. Any final questions before we close down the meeting? Once again, thank you very much for your attendance, and I look forward to seeing you for our next webinar.